My name is Anna Bryce, and I'm the VP of Programming here at the AMA Phoenix. And welcome. We are really happy to have everybody, and we have a nice crowd today. So again, welcome and thank you for joining us. Before we get started, this is one of my favorite topics because I always walk out of this presentation amazed at the numbers. So I think everyone will enjoy it. But before we get started, I would like to thank our sponsors. They do so much for us and we cannot thank them enough. They are what makes all of this possible and the education that we are able to bring to everyone. And for today, I want to particularly point out Taylor Wellman, who is our host every presentation we have. She has been hosting, and she is from Financial Potion. So if you have any video needs, in fact, I just had some video needs and just showed my client 15 minutes ago the video draft. So it was great having such a happy client and working with such a great video company. So if you have any video needs, please consider giving Taylor a call. And of course, I can always give you her contact information if you need it. And we would like to thank our supporters. And these are the companies that employ our board members. And again, without their support, our board members can't do what we do. So we thank them. And I just would like to jump right into the presentation. And we have had a little change in the speaker lineup because Monica, who is the president and CEO of the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, was called away to a meeting, a big board meeting. So we have a great lineup to replace Monica, and I think you will be happy. So I would like to introduce Evelyn Vega, who is our VP of Career Development at AMA Phoenix, and she will do the introductions. Thanks, Evelyn.
Thanks, Anna. Welcome, everyone. So excited to learn more about the state of Arizona's Hispanic market, and I believe they're going to be covering national stats too, so stay tuned. Again, I'm Evelyn Vega. I am past president of the Phoenix chapter. I still serve as on the board, on this wonderful board, I should say, as their VP of Career Development. I also work for Staffing Strong. We're a marketing, digital, and creative staffing agency, and we are a proud supporter of the AMA Phoenix. So today I have the honor of introducing our presenters, Catalina Perez and Jaime Boyd. Catalina studied communications at Arizona State University, and while attending ASU, she also interned for the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for 2 years, and now is a permanent staff member of the chamber. And she manages their market intelligence for the annual DATOS report that you'll hear about today. And Catalina is also an Arizona native. I'm also presenting with Catalina is Jaime Boyd, who is the Regional Research Director for Univision Local Media in Arizona. Jaime has a bachelor's degree in marketing from Arizona State University. Jaime's media career began at the Arizona Republic and has also worked for Cooley Advertising and PR and now at Univision. Jaime also serves on the research committees for the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce annual DATOS report, as well as the state of the LGBTQ in Arizona. And also I found out today that Jaime is also an Arizona native. So give it up for the Arizona natives. I'm one. I heard we're a rare breed, but now we have 3 people on this presentation that are Arizona natives. So that's great to know. So guys, please help me in welcoming Catalina and Jaime.
Thank you, Evelyn. I'll go ahead and share my presentation with you all. Okay, so thank you, Evelyn. Thank you to the AMA for inviting us to present to you all. As she mentioned, I'm Catalina Perez. I've been working at the chamber for 2 years, and this is going to be my 3rd year working on DATOS. I manage our market intelligence, and that includes any data requests that come through. So if anyone is looking for any specific data on the Hispanic market, please feel free to contact me after this presentation and I'll be happy to share that with you. I want to start out by mentioning our Los Amigos corporate partners. This is our roster of corporate partners that we have in Arizona. 10 years ago, we had 22, now we have over 70. We estimate that there are about 90 Fortune 2000 companies in Arizona, and we have an investment relationship with more than 70 of them. The Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce has been around for over 70 years, and we focus on 5 key areas: economic development, capacity building, advocacy, education, and market intelligence. And today we're going to be focusing on market intelligence. For 24 years, the Chamber has delivered reliable, responsible, and relevant data to corporate Arizona, small businesses, and policymakers, especially small business members that are constantly making decisions on how to interact with consumers and how to market themselves. And because of our sponsors and the work that they do, we're excited to be able to help these small businesses. For 22 years, SRP has been our underwriter. They have really believed in our market intelligence work and the work that we provide, and the work that we do is good information. Again, not just for corporate Arizona and small business members, but also for legislators that are making public policy decisions. In the last 8 years, we've put out 10 marketing and research publications, both primary and secondary. We have DATOS, which is our flagship publication for our market intelligence. 22 years ago, when all of this started, the chamber was getting a lot of questions about Latinos in Arizona, and they decided to create some basic information. It was just, a report of a few pages, and the event had maybe 50 people in attendance. And since then, they've grown their we've grown our market intelligence, and our DATOS event now brings in more than 1,200 people. And last year, because of the pandemic, we had our first virtual DATOS event and panel discussion, which was still a great success. And we had more than 1,000 views, I believe. And DATOS is the most comprehensive compilation of secondary research on the Hispanic market in Arizona. I know other chamber in the country does this, and we're very excited to be a part of this and be able to produce a publication like this for the state of Arizona. In addition to DATOS, we also have our primary research, which is the report on your right. The Minority Business Enterprise Study. So we surveyed 800 minority businesses in Arizona back in 2012, and that work hadn't been done since 2007. So that was a great pre and post recession analysis. And that study created the 4 studies on the right: the Minority Business Enterprise Report, the Women-Owned Business Enterprise Report, the Family-Owned Business Enterprise Report, and the Hispanic-Owned Business Enterprise Report. Some of the key findings, in the family-owned report, 56% of those minority-owned businesses are family-owned, and we found out that there's a huge lack of succession planning. We interviewed these businesses and asked, why did you want to start your business? And their answer usually was, well, it's for my kids, it's for my legacy. And then we would ask the kids, what they thought about the business, and they'd say that they wanted nothing to do with that business. So this shows us that family-owned businesses don't have the sustainability right now or the resources that they need to continue doing business in Arizona, whether it's from a structural or financial standpoint. In the middle, we have our series of best practices. Over 70+ corporate partners look to us to provide these best practices so that they can do business in a responsible way. They're almost like a how-to for corporations. For example, we have the supplier diversity best practices, which tells you how to start doing business with minority suppliers or how to increase business with minority suppliers. And right now we will be coming out with a diversity, equity, and inclusion best practices, I believe in August. So that's exciting. So all of this gives you more information on what we do, and we like to go in depth because we consider the chamber, the AZHCC, to be very different from other chambers of commerce in what we do and what we produce and the information that we provide. And of course, none of this would be possible without the volunteer efforts of our DATOS committee. JV Boyd, who I'll introduce in a minute, she's part of this elite group that we are very thankful to have her, and she's been a part of this for many, many years. So our DATOS publication is a 10-month process, and these dedicated subject matter experts lend their expertise, knowledge, and data tools to the publication to shape an objective and informative report. They help guide the conversation and data and make sure to look at any small details. Before meeting with the committee for the first time, I had often heard Monica say that these are some of the smartest people in Arizona, and in the short time that I've spent working on DATOS, I've been able to learn so much from them. 3 years ago, we partnered with Vitalist Health Foundation to utilize a national best practice called the Elements of a Healthy Community. This wheel demonstrates the 12 social determinants of a healthy community, and every year we are dedicating DATOS to each one. It's a framework through which we can filter the data, which helps us have better conversations with our corporate partners to create more social impact in our community. So 2 years ago, we focused on healthcare. Last year, we focused on education, and this year will be an emphasis on affordable housing. On this next slide, we have some primary research that we did with one of our corporate partners, West Group Research. We took all of those elements of a healthy community and pulled Arizona. What we found is that when we look at the importance of these elements, education, healthcare, and economic opportunities are at the top of that list. This is what Arizonans consider to be the most important elements of a healthy community. So if education is a top priority for the people of Arizona, but we're ranked 46th in the country in terms of educational achievement in K through 12, and that can be a problem. Again, this allows us to look at the data in very different ways. So now these are our 4 key points to our DATOS presentation. We have a population of 60 million Hispanics in the US, and that doesn't include undocumented or Puerto Rico. Excuse me. 20 years ago, it was 60% foreign born and 40% US born. And over the last 2 decades, those numbers have reversed, with the majority being US born now. So now 60% is US born, 40% is foreign born. And also 1 in every 4 births is to a Hispanic mother. So we're quickly becoming the largest minority in the US. And if all Hispanics in the United States were their own country, they would be the 25th largest out of the 233 recognized countries. That's larger than Spain and every Latin American country, with the exception of Mexico and Brazil. Our spending power is significant, 1.7 trillion in purchasing power nationwide. And we use very conservative numbers. So even at that 1.7 trillion, that number rivals Australia and Canada's GDP. So if you think of GDP as the income that's being produced by a country, US Hispanics spend more than what Australia and Canada produce in GDP. We have 2.2 million Hispanics in Arizona. They represent 30% of Arizona, 40% of Phoenix Metro, and 50% of our K through 12. Arizona being in the top 10 of all states with the most growth since the year 2000. So as you talk to your clients, remember that this is your future and the growth driver for most products and services. Hispanics in Arizona contribute $57 billion to Arizona's economy. On this next slide, you can see how much and how quickly the Hispanic population has grown in the US. As I mentioned, we're now at 60 million. Well, we reached 60 million in 2019. On this next slide, our friends at Claritas provided profiles of Arizona and major cities in the state. And in this year's datos, we know that Hispanics account for about a third of the state's population, second only to white non-Hispanics. Our state has the 6th largest population behind California, Texas, Florida, New York, and Illinois. Again, national purchasing power of in the US is nearly 2 trillion, and we will likely meet this Nielsen estimate sooner than expected. In Arizona, Latinos were estimated to reach 57 billion in 2022, and we surpassed that figure. But the greatest increases that we've seen are in business. So between 2002 and 2019, Hispanic businesses in the US more than doubled from 1.5 million to almost 5 million. The Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative study indicates that in 1 decade, while all other US business owners grew 1%, Latino business owners grew by 34%, while their white counterparts decreased by 6%. And still, Latino companies average revenues of 1.2 million per year, while non-Latino companies make almost double that in annual revenue. And we see this in Arizona as well, where Hispanic firms make 110,000 in average annual revenue, and non-Hispanic firms make significantly more in average annual revenue at 500. Then that disparity accounts for a gap of $36 billion not being actualized into Arizona's economy. We know that as I mentioned before, we know that in 2002, there were about 1.5 million Hispanic-owned businesses in the US. Just 2 years ago, there were 4.65, so about a 40% increase in Hispanic-owned firms. During that same period, all other firms only grew about 18%. And you can see that we're doubling the number of businesses that the general market has. So Hispanic-owned businesses are critical to the economy. They grow 3 to 4 times faster. Actually, 1/3 of all businesses owned by minority women are owned by Latinas. Now, more than 40% of Hispanic businesses make more than 1 million in annual revenue. That make more than 1 million in annual revenue are immigrant owned. So when it comes to our economy, immigrants play a significant role, not just in our workforce, but as business owners. And now I want to pass it on to our committee member, Jaime Boyd from Univision, to talk about our future workforce. And we focused on education last year, and we want to share some of our findings with you. And in the end, she'll talk a little bit about this year's datos topics. So again, thank you, Jaime, for lending your knowledge and expertise to this group and for being here today presenting with me.
Thank you for having me. I hope you guys can all hear me okay. Good. I'm having fun wearing headphones because I'm at my home, as I'm sure many of you are, with family and children, kitties. You know, they all like to make noise in the background. So hopefully hopefully they won't be distracted, but onto the data. I wanted to share with you guys some data that was presented actually in our DATOS presentation last in 2020, some really compelling research. So what this slide is showing is the percentage of population that's actually enrolled in school. And the Latino population in the United States tends to skew younger. So it's no surprise really that Hispanics represent the population with the largest percentage that's actually in school, with 56% currently the last time we had the data updated. So we're saying at 56% of Hispanics in school, it's outpacing white and Black students. This is a key indicator of what our future workforce will be in the US as well as our future consumers. Now, so when we talk about education and public schools, oh, I'm sorry. Let me see here. I'm looking at the wrong thing. I have too many screens going on over here too. So in Arizona, 46% of all K through 12 students are Latino, and we have the 6th largest Latino population of all states. And the 2020 UNIDOS US report included in this previous year's DATOS also details how on average, Arizona's F-rated schools have a student Latino population of about 67%. And they only make up about 27% of A-rated schools. And when you mix in the fact that 86% of English language learners are Latinos, those figures are not terribly surprising because children are being pulled out of core classes during the school day to attend English classes. But let me be clear on this point, bilingualism is not a disease, it's an advantage for students. So we know that through so much research that it's a really great benefit for students to know more than one language. It's so funny that there's actually bilingual schools popping up so students will actually learn to be bilingual. But again, I won't digress too much about it, but it's kind of interesting when you look at it. So this is an excellent example of that intersection between education, business, and policy. Educators indicate that teaching children in their native language improves test scores. Businesses considered speaking another language a desirable skill. So why did Arizona remain the last state to have English-only public school instruction state? Think about that for a little bit, and let's move on to some more other compelling information. So according to the Arizona Department of Education, Hispanic students outnumbered white students in all of the racial groups and ethnicities in 2011. So when you look at this chart, you can see actually in red, the red bars are Hispanic students, which ever since the year 2011 have been outnumbering white students, which is really interesting, but the plot thickens, there's more. Let's go to the next slide, please. The dropout rate of Hispanics in Arizona is nearly twice that of white students. And arguably Hispanic dropout has increased slightly, but this is more of a function of volume of students and less of the number of dropouts. If you were able to be at our DATOS presentation last year, we had a wonderful guest speaker, Dr. Rios, and he shared with us his story about how students of color are being pushed out of schools due to systemic inequalities, not so much as a result of other things, but something really interesting to take a look at. This data is really consistent with that. They're not necessarily dropping out, but they're being set up for failure. So that's something that really has to be looked at, especially in this state where Latinos represent such a large percentage of the population. And what do we pay our teachers? Gosh, don't get me started. I was originally going to be a teacher. My dad is a teacher and he talked me out of it. I love teaching. I love education so much, but it's just really a shame in Arizona that we are definitely one of the states that pays our teachers the least amount. Now, when you compare us to the national average and other neighboring states, in Arizona, our teachers are paid about 12 to 13,000 less per year than the national average. That's a house payment, really. Think of all the things that you could buy with an extra $13,000 a year. And this, of course, means that we are spending less on our children. And the U.S. Census Education Finance data reveals that we are in the bottom 5 of state per pupil spending. The latest figures that were released in 2020 actually shows that we spend less than what's actually indicated even on this chart. We're now at just a little over 8,000 per pupil spending. And overall, we rank 47th. New York spends almost 3 times what we do on their students. So, you know, there's a lot that we can do to catch up. But there is some encouraging information out there too. I'm encouraged by programs like the one featured in our last year's DATOS report. Read On is a statewide public and private partnership of agencies, philanthropic organizations, and community stakeholders committed to creating an effective continuum of services to improve language and literacy outcomes for Arizona's children from birth through age 8. And in partnership with the Maricopa Association of Governments, they developed this really cool tool. It's called Maplet, and it's interactive, and it provides users with statewide early literacy data and visualizations. And tools like this one help parents, teachers, and students make evidence-based decisions about their students' education. It's actionable data, and that's what we're all about with data, with DATOS. So hope that you guys find this interesting as well. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about Hispanic homeowners in Arizona. This is the topic for this year's DATOS. So last year we were focused more on education, and this year we're going to be talking about you know, where people are living conditions, you know, anything about you know, that part of the Vitalist wheel, and we know that that's part of a healthy community is your living situation. So my extra portion here is going to be focused just on Hispanic homeowners and specific to Arizona. So first of all, let's talk a little bit more about the population, specifically in the Phoenix-Maricopa County area. When you look at the growth, and as we were talking about at the beginning, I'm an Arizona native. I've lived here all my life. I have experienced this growth. I was not born in the year 2000. I was born a little bit before that, but the total population in the Maricopa County area has grown by about 47%, which is quite significant over the last 20 years. But when you look at the white non-Hispanic population from the year 2000 to 2020, we saw a growth of about 19%, which is still quite sizable. However, when you really focus in on the Hispanic population, that's what's really driving the growth, up 91% and adding 700,000 people to the total population over the last 20 years. So that is definitely a huge number of people being added to the population, and especially compared to any other racial and ethnic group, far outpaces even the Black, Asian, other or two or more races, American Indian or Pacific Islander groups all added together. And then we'll animate that. When you really, you take that 700,000 people added to the population, Hispanics represented almost 50% of the growth in population over the last 20 years. So really, if you were to break this down and say, okay, 4 people moved to the Phoenix area, 2 were Hispanic, 1 was white, and 1 was another race. So really you see that not only are Hispanics representing a large percentage of the population, but also really growing the overall population. We talked about this younger population too. And this is what I kind of think about as my crystal ball. The future of Phoenix is our children. Didn't Whitney Houston sing that a long time ago? Bringing it back for those before 2000, right? 46% or nearly half the population under 18 in Maricopa County is Hispanic. So right now, about a third of our population overall is Hispanic. But this younger group is heavily concentrated with Hispanics who will be growing up, becoming consumers, being in the workforce, etc. So this is our crystal ball for the future. And not only, we're seeing this growing population, but we're also seeing the household income for Hispanics growing, which is really great news too, because this population is younger than their non-Hispanic counterparts. And when you just think about going through your life, as you've grown up and become more successful in your career, you've moved up the ladder, and you start to make more money. So much of the Hispanic population is in the younger population. So it makes sense that Hispanics kind of make a little bit less money than their non-Hispanic counterparts, but it's encouraging to see that there's that growth. So especially in that group of 75K plus, we see significant growth, 465% growth in the last 20 years compared to 164% for their non-Hispanic counterparts. And when we really focus on households that are making 100K plus, and we're projecting into the future for Arizona, we see that the percentage of Hispanics that will be earning more. We're seeing a growth of about 46% compared to 24% for non-Hispanic. So almost doubling the pace of growth in that income bracket. So for marketers, this is also another kind of a crystal ball. It's like, okay, well, if I know that there's a significant number of people that are going to be making a lot more money, you really got to get in front of them too, to make sure that they know about your products. Let's talk a little bit more about home ownership, right? So with this extra income, you can definitely buy more things, and home ownership is really the American dream, right? Everybody wants to, eventually own your home, grow your family, etc. So a few attitudinal statements about Hispanics. 88% agree that owning a home is the best investment plan and they're better off owning than renting. 80% believe owning a home will help them achieve a goal of building wealth. 78% agree that owning a home as opposed to renting is a better way to improve their overall financial outlook. And 52% believe that buying a home is a safe investment with a lot of potential. Arizona is a hot spot for Hispanic homeowner growth. We already mentioned the population has been growing by leaps and bounds. When you look at all other states across the United States, the Hispanic rank for home ownership is actually number 4 for Arizona. We only rank behind Texas, California, and Arizona for the number of Hispanic owner-occupied housing units. And Hispanic percent of owner-occupied housing units for Arizona is about 20%. What's interesting, though, is if you were to take Hispanics out of the equation and only look at the number of owner-occupied housing units for non-Hispanics across the entire country, out of all 50 states, we would actually rank number 21. So think about that. Total rank for Arizona is 16. So it's really the Hispanic homeowners that are helping Arizona have a higher rate of home ownership overall. When you think about, how many homes are owned by Hispanics, it's about 1 out of 5, as I mentioned, about 20%. And when you look at the growth rate, usually when I look at this growth rate, I like to just look back to the year 2010 because of the housing crisis that we had kind of in the late 2000s. So I feel like backing up to maybe about 2010 is when we had a little bit more of a reset. But we saw a 28% increase in owner-occupied housing unit growth for the Hispanic population. The non-Hispanic population only saw growth of 6%. So more than quadruple the growth for Hispanics there. So a sizable population growing by leaps and bounds for home ownership. Hispanics represented the only growth for new construction homes in Phoenix. So looking in the percent change in the number of adults who have a new construction home versus 10 years ago, we actually saw the number of non-Hispanics with a new construction home decline by 5%. Hispanics were up about 72%. And then the number that are in an existing construction home, so, a home that's been built, non-Hispanics grew by about 8% and Hispanics only grew by about 3%. So kind of interesting to think about the differences. And I think what, just kind of adding my 2 cents as a person who's lived here all my life, there's so much new construction. I remember back in, the early 90s, my dad bought a house at Tatum and Bell. And that was at the far reaches of the earth. There was like no 101 freeway. It took you like a half hour to get there from mid-Scottsdale. And now that's pretty much central Phoenix. So, new construction is popping up. And then people who move here from other places, they don't mind driving because, if you're moving from California, you're used to the long commutes and people will pay more. So with this influx of Hispanics moving to the Valley, there's a lot of growth opportunity in the new construction arena. And don't forget all the things that come with buying a new house too, right? You're going to need the garage, you're going to need all the pool equipment, the furniture, the pest control, especially if they're not used to scorpions coming from somewhere else. lots of opportunity there. So when we look at the Hispanics are representing a larger percentage of homeowners across Arizona. And what with DATOS, we really look at, the full state of Arizona, but I thought this is kind of interesting to break out and look at the different counties. So thankful working with other markets across the United States that Arizona only has 15 counties. That's a nice benefit, but you can really see where Hispanic homeowners over-index in certain counties compared to others. So like Santa Cruz County, which is on the border really with Mexico, we see a really high percentage of home ownership among Hispanics. For Pima County, which I highlighted, that's our Tucson area, about 27% of Hispanics are homeowners. I'm sorry, Hispanics represent 27% of all homeowners. For Maricopa County, it's about 19%. This will show us, oh, we go one more, there we go. This is looking at the projected number. So projected to continue to grow, okay, across the state. I'm just trying to kind of breeze through these quickly because there's so much data, so little time, as I like to say. Did you know, just some really cool, like kind of trivial facts, because, you know, I really like to dig into the numbers, and this was just so interesting to me. So among the data I looked at, came across 186 cities in Arizona with 100 or more owner-occupied housing units. Out of those 186 cities, 24 cities saw growth in Hispanic owner-occupied housing units, while non-Hispanics actually declined. 44 cities saw Hispanics comprise 50% or more of the growth. And then 23 cities saw Hispanics represent all of the growth of the housing units. So that would mean that non-Hispanics did not grow at all. So, you know, not only is the Hispanic homeownership growth concentrated in the Phoenix area, but really throughout the state. These are the fastest growing cities. So out of those 186 that I was just talking about, these are the fastest growing cities ranked by the growth in owner-occupied housing units in the last 10 years. Phoenix, followed by Mesa, Gilbert, Tucson, and even Scottsdale. So this is the fastest for just overall all owner-occupied housing units. And these are the fastest growing cities in Arizona for Hispanic homeownership growth. So Tucson ranks at the top. Phoenix, Mesa, Glendale, Yuma, Buckeye, and so on. And even Scottsdale pops up in the top 15 across the state. So really interesting to see. Don't worry, we're going to be sending out this presentation afterwards too. So if you didn't have a chance to take copious notes, or you want to dive in a little bit deeper on the slides, we'll make sure you guys get a copy of this. Again, you know, just projecting in the next 5 years, Arizona is projected to add over 45,000 Hispanic homeowners, representing 51% of all new homeowners added to the state. So again, I always like to look at projections. It's so interesting to see. And you know how tight, if you're looking for a house or if you're looking to rent anything, the market is so tight right now. There is so much demand, and so much of that is being driven by the Hispanic population too. When we look at that, new homeowners added in the next 5 years, the projections that we're seeing is that Hispanic owner-occupied housing units are going to be growing by about 13%. Which is about triple the rate of non-Hispanics at 4%. Now, this is where we, again, look at our projections, our crystal ball, for the fastest growing cities in Arizona for Hispanic homeowner growth in the next 5 years. So Phoenix is projected to be the fastest growing city for Hispanic homeownership growth. What's really interesting to see when you look across the columns, the first column with numbers is the actual number of growth in Hispanic owner-occupied housing units. And then that, so about 9,500 Hispanic owner-occupied housing units, that's a mouthful to say, 10 times. So we're looking at, let's round it to 9,500 units being added, and that represents about 12% growth. But when you look to the next column, we're seeing a decline actually for non-Hispanic owner-occupied housing unit growth. So we're not seeing any growth there. So only Hispanics are projected to grow. In the cities of Tucson and Mesa, Hispanics are projected to represent 100% of the growth. And then again, in Glendale and Yuma, only Hispanic owner-occupied housing units are projected to grow in those areas. So if you have any businesses that you're working with any businesses that are based in those areas, this is a prime opportunity to be targeting the Hispanic population in those markets, especially since they're representing such a large percentage of the growth in Hispanic homeowners. So this is really interesting. When we look at Hispanics, are 13% more likely to plan to buy a new home in the next year, but are more likely to buy if they're currently renting. So again, looking at marketing implications for this population, Overall, the Hispanics are in the darker gray and non-Hispanics are in the lighter gray. Hispanics are 13% more likely to buy a home in the next year. But when homeowners who plan to buy is a little bit less, so 6.9% of Hispanic homeowners are planning to buy compared to 10.6% of Hispanic renters. And the same for non-Hispanics too. Non-Hispanic renters are also more likely. If you want to go to the next slide. And then Hispanics are 118% more likely to plan to buy new construction. As we mentioned, that's where we had seen most of the growth in new construction was really coming from the Hispanic population. And they're also, again, for the future, more likely to plan to buy a newly constructed home. We want to go to the next slide here. What's really interesting too, though, is we're talking about all this home buying, we're talking about this income growing, but actually Hispanics tend to underindex for having a mortgage. So on the left side in the grayer bars, we actually see the rate of Hispanics that have a mortgage among homeowners has actually gone down slightly from the last 10 years. And overall, Hispanics are a little less likely than non-Hispanics to have a mortgage. So, so that's really interesting to think about there. You know, the marketing implications for that, you know, would it make sense to market more to Hispanics to get them to have mortgages, maybe get an equity line of credit if they already own their home, could they make more improvements, and so on. Just a couple more to talk about here. You know, when you think about the Hispanic household size, they tend to be a lot larger in general, especially compared to the non-Hispanic households. Sorry, we kind of blended these presentations together, so we got a little bit lost in the formatting. But what's really interesting to see is that the average household sizes, depending on if you're renting or owning, it differs between Hispanics and non-Hispanics. So overall, Hispanics tend to have just larger household sizes in general. But what's interesting is when you look at the differences in household size between owning and renting. So for example, among all households, Hispanics tend to have one more person living in the household. But when it comes to homeowners, they actually have slightly more people than non-Hispanics. For renters, non-Hispanics tend to have a little bit more people per household when it comes to renting. So that's kind of interesting to think about there. And then these are the types of dwellings for homeowners on the left versus renters on the right. So, you know, where are people living currently? The darker blue represents Hispanics and the lighter blue represents non-Hispanics. For both groups, single family house is the most popular type of dwelling. However, when you look at the right side, apartment comes in a very close number too. What's interesting to see among renters is Hispanics are more likely to rent a house as compared to non-Hispanics. And when you look, you know, kind of side by side at apartment rentals, non-Hispanics are more likely to rent apartments and also more likely to rent condominiums and mobile manufactured homes. And then Hispanics are more likely to be renting townhomes. And that, we crammed a whole bunch of information into a quick presentation, but we definitely wanted to leave some time open for some questions. And I will leave it there. Thank you so much for your time.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. That was so full of content, but we already knew that just from before. So thank you so very much. I had a couple questions, and everyone else, as I'm asking these questions, please feel free to post any additional questions that you might have in the chat. I actually want to start with this one. Are there any particular suggestions or tactics that you could give to marketers and businesses to help them appeal and reach out to that Hispanic market?
Well, I could take that one, if that's okay with you, Catalina. So one of the things that we recommend is really, you know, trying as much as you can to make that cultural connection, really cutting through the clutter, you know, and I just, you know, I always hate to kind of seem biased because I work for Spanish language media, but I wouldn't work for Spanish language media if it didn't work. I'm not Hispanic, I don't speak Spanish, but I think that when I see the results of just reaching out to someone in their native language, it really cuts through the clutter. It really shows that you're putting forth the effort and you're really providing that invitation which we don't really see as often. There's a million invitations that are so generic, in mass media, in English language. You are bombarded by commercials, but there is so many less people reaching out to Hispanics in Spanish. So that's one of the first things that we usually recommend, is that if you really want to make that cultural connection, Spanish is really the language of the heart too. So you're building that connection right there. It's not easy to do though. So I would definitely recommend, don't use Google Translate. Work with a professional consultant, somebody that can help you with that. But good question.
Excellent. And along those same lines, we just got a question posted. So it's sounding like you would definitely recommend to, have a Spanish speaking video or, something authentic to that sense. But do you have a breakdown of the language in Arizona? What percentage of Arizona Hispanics that are just Spanish speaking only, or Spanish dominant versus English dominant versus bilingual?
Yeah, that's a great question. We find that in Arizona, we have an extremely bilingual population. There are so many people that, you might think, oh, okay, that person's Hispanic, but they're speaking English because they're out and about. But then we know from our media numbers that we look at Nielsen, and we see, who's watching TV, who's listening to the radio, and Spanish language formats continue to dominate among Hispanics there too. So, I think as we kind of mentioned, being bilingual is definitely a bonus, right? You have free will to do whatever you want. You can listen to English, you could watch Spanish, you could, get by day to day out in the world where everybody's speaking English too. But when it comes to marketing and making those connections, we definitely recommend Spanish. It's not so much, to actually quote the numbers, I want to say it's about 87% of Hispanics in the Phoenix area speak at least some Spanish in the home. And we're talking about, also not only speaking Spanish though, but also have the ability, a large percentage to have the ability to also speak English too.
Amy, thank you so much. My name is Monica Villalobos. I serve as president and CEO of the Arizona Hispanic Chamber. I was initially scheduled to give this presentation, so I'm so grateful to Catalina and Jaime for jumping in for me. It takes a village, right? And so I'm really grateful. And of course to the AMA, who has invited us back year after year to give this presentation. One thing I do want to share with you in general when it comes to, sort of marketing and wanting to attract Hispanics, we are seeing a move toward Hispanic marketing being the strategy, right? Not just being a subset of the strategy. So a really good case example is the most recent news of the Arizona Coyotes, right? Ice hockey team. Typically not a lot of Latinos in ice hockey, just as a general rule. But now we have the first Latino owner of an NHL team and the first Latino president of an NHL team. And when you speak to them, what they're saying is, we're looking at the demographics and the future of Arizona becoming a majority state. Hispanic is the strategy, right? It's not the other way around, like, oh, I have a general market strategy and then I'm going to do this Hispanic thing on the side, but rather, going to where the puck is, right? Skating to the puck, no pun intended, but skating to the puck and where it's going, as opposed to, necessarily what's being done today. So just a few thoughts, but I am so grateful to all of you for your interest in DATOS.
Monica, to your point, is it a Hispanic strategy first, general strategy second, or they might be side by side? Like, in other words, Hispanic strategy is not now like 2 or 1A or 1B or whatever, but like an equal kind of a strategy?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing, it's almost, kind of running in parallel. And what's coming out is a strategy that is primarily Hispanic, and Jaime deals with these folks all the time, right? Advertisers that have a specific strategy, but you all have been in advertising. I know I started my career in the advertising field as well. And, years ago, 30 years ago, I'm going to date myself now, 30 years ago, it was sort of, you had a general market strategy, and then you had some boutique shop that was Hispanic, and sort of the budget was just crumbs, right? They would get kind of the leftovers, and the strategy and their job was really just to rubber stamp the translation of the general market strategy. We have come a long way since then. So now this new strategy takes into consideration the complexities of Hispanics, that they're, you know, they speak different languages, that if you want to reach them, you know, you can do a bilingual spot, but if you want to resonate with them, that's a different conversation, right? You speak the language of the heart. And so that was a very long answer, Anna, to your question, but in essence, we are seeing more companies really taking on Hispanic as the primary strategy, with other segments being, you know, sort of the secondary, if you will, but running in parallel.
Okay, interesting. I hadn't heard that before, so that is very interesting.
Also, from a financial standpoint, a lot of these businesses are unfamiliar with valuations of their business. And so what they'll do is say, you know, my blood, sweat, and tears are worth, you know, $20 million. And that may be true, but that's not the worth on the open market, right? And so it's really important to understand those kinds of dynamics in family-owned businesses. With regard to, you know, sort of recruiting and the trades, this to me is a perfect example of the intersection between education and business. We talked a lot about that last year. You saw the education data. You know, this is our future. And so, and there are future entrepreneurs, compounded by the fact that we are a small business state, means that there are going to be deep impacts into the economy unless the small business community reaches out to those to those kids that are in our education system, to prepare them for what tomorrow needs. Right? What we do today isn't going to matter if they're not prepared. So I think I'm just reaffirming what you're saying, which is there's more need, right, for exactly that. It doesn't exist right now. I haven't seen it.
How do you see that community, like reaching out to? Oh, we've got a. I guess what efforts are there out there to, you know, meet kids where they're at, meet parents where they're at in schools, and yeah, link them up with careers that are rewarding, that might not match that 4-year university path or traditional path. Like,
right. Yeah, no, I hear exactly what you're saying. There is a wonderful initiative out of the Phoenix Union School District called the Academies at South Mountain. I was among a business leader group that went to Nashville to see how it worked. And I'll tell you, my initial reaction to teaching high schoolers a trade, at first I was very reluctant, because I said, you know, these poor kids, they're just trying to get through school, and now you're going to ask them to, you know, get a profession at 14. Like, that just seemed very unlikely. But what we found, and I felt like, oh, if they do that, they're not going to go to college, right? Now college is no longer an option for them. And what the data suggests, and Nashville has been doing this for 10 years, so they've got some pretty good data. What it suggests is that students are actually more likely to go to college when they do gain a trade in high school, because now they can go to college and not have to work a minimum wage job, because they've got a, you know, dental hygienist certificate, they've got a paralegal certificate, they have something that they can do while they go to school, so they don't have to live in that, you know, in that kind of dire straits that we all remember from, you know, going to college. So that to me is a really innovative approach. It moved Nashville from Tennessee from being the 49th state in terms of education achievement, so they were second to the bottom, up to 39 within 10 years. And given that we are 47th, at this point, you know, the bar is pretty low, so anything, you know, would be helpful. So Dr. Chad Guesson is having a lot of success with the Academies at South Mountain that is modeled after Nashville. And I think we're going to see more of that, because they're doing exactly what you're asking. They're matching, you know, trades and vocations at the high school level so that they're already prepared whether or not they decide to go to college.
Well, thank you very much, Catalina. Thank you, Jamie, and Monica. Thank you for jumping on as soon as you were able to. Really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
And as always, for me, this is always such a great presentation because the numbers are incredible. They're going up every time we talk about this each year. And there's always something new each year that we hear that, that we as marketers and business people need to know. So thank you once again for joining us this year. And I will get the presentation and the recording to everybody. And like I said, we'll recap those last couple of questions. So anyone who didn't get back on, they can hear what that was. Thank you for joining us. I would like to once again just give an update on our upcoming events. June 23rd, which is a Wednesday, lunchtime, Rami Kalla from Point in Time Studio will be discussing HXR, Extended Reality and Immersive Marketing and Beyond. So please join, that'll be a real interesting one. And then July 28th, also a lunchtime webinar. Greg Kilstrom will be speaking on the return on experience, measuring the ROI of customer experience. I'm really looking forward to that talk. And we don't have listed here, but our big event, and it is going to be virtual this year, is Spectrum, which is July 21st. So hopefully you can join us for that. And then one last thanks to our sponsors. And again, Taylor and Financial Potion. And I didn't realize it, but April from Made Better Studios was online. So she's another one to mention. And West Group, who actually participated in some of the information that was presented. So would like to point them out. So again, everybody, thank you for joining us. Monica, Catalina, and Jamie, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. We appreciate that you take the time with us every year. And I just can't say thank you enough for taking the time out to do that. And then again, everybody who joined us, thank you for joining us. And I hope to see you in 2 weeks. Have a great rest of your afternoon, everybody.